And welcome to another Spectrum Geeks video. My name is Dale and thanks very much for tuning in to another one of our monthly solar PV updates for our system here in the UK. If you are new to the channel and new to these series of videos, please click the card up above to find out more information about our solar house setup. So let's kick it off. This is for the month of April 2022. Well, it's been a little bit variable, so it'll be interesting to see how the system's performed compared to other years. And this is also my first full month on the revised Octopus Go tariff, where obviously the price has increased a little bit, both in terms of the peak cost, which went up significantly, pretty much, I think went over double, and then the off-peak cost went up a little bit as well. So most of our cost is off-peak, but interested to see how this has affected our bills. So let's kick off with how our system has performed in terms of solar PV production for April 2022. So in April 2022, the system produced 941.6 kilowatt hours of solar energy, and we were able to utilise 84% of that. So 789.73 kilowatt hours was put into our house and charging batteries and cars and heating up water, etc. And we exported then 16%. So 151.88 kilowatt hours of electricity went back into the grid. So not too bad, I think, in terms of performance, for the month. Again, it's always, well, it's good and bad when you have the ability to export. Maybe we're not home at the time, we could plug more things in and perhaps we could have better utilised that. But in terms of our grid import, we imported 490 kilowatt hours, so that's 38% of our energy came from the grid in April, and that's really because we still are charging our cars off peak, and there is still a little bit of charging of the Tesla Powerwall 2 that happens off peak as well, but we're going to the cost of that in a little bit more detail in just a moment. So if we compare the month of April 2022 to previous years, so we've obviously got 21, 20, 19, 18, I think is as far back as we go. So you can see here that 2022 is actually worse than the last 2 years, but was actually up on 2019. So I find it quite interesting to see how the system is performing month by month over these years in comparison. It gives you some indication, to kind of also how you feel about the weather. Sometimes I think, I don't think this April has been quite as hot or sunny or warm as previous years, and this helps kind of back up that data. So I find it pretty interesting. So now let's talk about both our best and worst solar generations for the month in April 2022. So our best day was on the 30th of April, so the last day of April, unsurprisingly, and we generated 52.476 kilowatt hours of solar energy. And our worst day was on the 12th of April, where we only generated 6.177 kilowatt hours of energy. So that's really the standout stuff for April. Now let's talk about our electricity costs and how much our payback is working based on our feed-in tariffs, generation, and all that. And as mentioned, this month is our first month on the new Octopus Energy tariff. So on the new tariff, our costs are as follows. We now pay 30.78 pence per kilowatt hour during peak times and 7.50 pence during off-peak times. So it is a significant increase, but there's a couple of things if you've got solar that's kind of good and interesting about this particular tariff. First of all, it means any solar generation you have that you're not having to buy from the grid is obviously worth a lot more, pretty much double what it was before. And also the gap between the peak and the off-peak costs has now grown more significantly. So if you do have a battery and you can charge up cars and heat up hot water off-peak, then you'll make an even bigger savings than you were before, because again it's 15p and 5p, and now we're 30p and 7.5p, so a much bigger gap. So again, prices have gone up, but in some ways your savings are a bit better as well. That's a little bit of man maths there. I don't know, let me know what you think in the comments. So in terms of the solar payback and kind of how we do the man math earnings for the month of April 2022, it is as follows. So in terms of what we get paid for our generation on the feed-in tariff, this month we get paid £38.84. Then the deemed export, which is basically half of our generation, regardless of how much we actually export or not, we get paid £25.89. Then the electricity that the solar generated for the month, which means we didn't have to buy that from the grid at peak costs, That saves us £243.08. So our total kind of payback into our solar payback cash pot results in £307.81 for the month of April. If we did get paid for what we exported, we weren't on the feed-in tariff. As mentioned, we exported 151.88 kilowatt hours, and based on the kind of rough payment for export right now, we would have been paid £8.35 for that export. So in terms of our electricity costs, so the bill that we get from Octopus Energy, it doesn't actually go from the 1st to the 30th, so it's kind of like a rolling month. So I think 4th of March, or no, 4th of April to 4th of May, so it's a little bit varied, but give you a rough idea. And the most important thing for me is the average unit costs that we end up paying. So for April, our costs were, our usage, I should say, of what we bought from the grid was 582.6 kilowatt hours, and that resulted in an average unit cost of 9.45 pence per kilowatt hour. So that's actually an increase of 80% over the previous costs that we had on previous months on the Octopus Go tariff. So 80% obviously is a significant rise, but we've all seen a significant rise in energy costs. And I think if we weren't able to utilise off-peak and stuff, I think it'd be like over 120% or more in terms of increase based on my rough calculations. Okay, now, so then to finish up the video, we'll talk about how we use that solar energy in the house, how many kilowatts went to different things. So we've got the MyEnergi Eddi that we use to heat our hot water, both with solar surplus as well as off-peak energy. And in April, we basically used this. We put 196.4 kilowatt hours of electricity into heating hot water, but 100 kilowatt hours of that did come from solar surplus, so that's really good. Then in terms of charging our electric vehicles, we used a total of 316.35 kilowatt hours of electricity in vehicle charging. 79% of that did come from the grid during off-peak times, so 246.82 kilowatt hours was from the grid, and then solar surplus was 69.53 kilowatt hours, so 21% of that did come from solar surplus. And then finally, if we look at the Powerwall, once again Tesla have updated the app, which has made it much more difficult for me to see how much of the energy in the Powerwall came from the grid versus solar. So again, all I can say is how much we got out of our Powerwall over the month of April. So again, that's going to be a mixture of off-grid, off-peak energy and solar energy. Lot more solar energy than from the grid in April is my belief, but I haven't got the stats to back it up. But we did get 314.8 kilowatt hours of energy out of the Tesla Powerwall 2 to power our house during peak times, and obviously reduce our energy costs a little bit. So I hope these monthly updates continue to be useful. Thanks very much for watching. Please like the video if you have done, and consider subscribing if you haven't done already. Any questions, comments or feedback, please leave them down the bottom in the comments. And also, as always, I'm interested to see and hear how has your system performed. Has it been similar to my system here in Worcestershire? Better, worse than previous years? Anything you're willing to share with myself and others will be much appreciated. That's it. Until the next one, take care of yourself and goodbye for now.